Hey guys, and welcome to another video. So today I'm going to show you a variation of an old design, like a really old design that I came up with a while ago. It is the Chinese finger trap bracelet, blanked on it for a minute there, but it's got fishtails on the sides. And the other big difference is that I'm making it on the monster tail instead of on the rainbow loom, so you can make it as long or short as you want. And as you notice, it's cool because it's kind of reversible. So the colors flip when you reverse it. I also made one with pink and blue diamonds and white diamonds. And then I made one with 4 different colors in the middle, which is the kind I'm going to show you in the video today, just so you have that option and you see how to do it. So let's get started. Let's get into our materials. So for the fishtails on the sides of your bracelet, you're going to need 102 bands for that. In this tutorial, I'll be using white bands. Next, you'll need up to 4 different colors for the diamonds. So like I said, there's always a hair in all of these. So like I said, I'll be doing 4 different colors in this tutorial, just so you guys get more options there. So you'll need 24 bands each if you decide to use 4 colors. So here, for this bracelet, I used 24 peach, 24 yellow, 24 mint green, and then 24 purple. And in this tutorial I'll be using pink, yellow, blue, and purple for my 4 different colors in the middle here. And if you wanted to do 2 colors like I did with this pink bordered bracelet, you'd do 48 black and 48 white. And then this one's kind of a mix between the two. So you'd do 48 white and then 24 blue and then 24 pink. So those are the main color variations that I anticipate you guys using for this bracelet. So like I said, you'll need a monster tail, really anything with an 8-peg layout like this. You can probably use the alpha loom. You could reorganize your rainbow loom to get it in the right position, but I'm using my monster tail. You will need all 8 pegs. And yeah, I think that's it. Obviously a hook, as usual. I still don't know where my tan metal tipped hook is, so maybe I'll find that someday. But yeah, let's get on into it. So first step is you're going to put down 2 cap bands for your fishtails. So you're going to put the first one on these 2 pegs right here. So just twist that on as usual, like that. Push it down, and then do the same thing on the other side. So you have this layout so far. Alright, and then the next step is you're going to put down your first 2 sets of bands for your diamonds in the center. So like I said, I'm doing 2 colors, so I'm going to start with my first color, which is pink. You're going to take 2 of these bands, not just one, you're going to take 2 at a time, and you're going to lay them onto these 2 pegs right here. So take those pink bands and just stretch them across those 2 pegs. Just like that. And try not to twist them or anything. You'll want to keep them looking as neat as you can manage. Next, I'm going to pick up my next color. Again, picking up 2 of this next color, so 2 yellows. And do the same thing just on the other side. Right, and then the next step is you're going to lay down more fishtail bands. So you're going to lay these just right on top of where your cat bands were. So on those 2 pegs and on these other 2 pegs over here. And now that you've done this, you're going to lift your pink bands over onto that white band and do the same thing on the other side with the yellow bands. Just lift them up and over. So I'm going to take my hook and just get in there, grab those bands, and just kind of slowly lift those up and over. And you'll want to make sure that it stays on this peg for now. So leave them on that peg. And then do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to use my fingers. I kind of feel like my fingers are a little easier to do it with a lot of the time. All right, and so now that you have that set up, what you're gonna do next is you're gonna actually move these bands off these outer pegs right here. So you're gonna take the bands on this pink peg and you're going to move them to this upper center peg. So I'm gonna pick those up. So you can do this with your finger or you can use your hook for it. I feel like my fingers might be a little easier. So I'm just gonna take it, pinch those, try not to have my hand cover the entire camera. And then, like I said, just plop them up there. And then do the same exact thing with the yellows, except you're putting them on this bottom middle peg right here. So pinch those up and then plop them over there. So you just move the pink bands from here to here, move the yellow bands from here to here. So now you got that down. And now that you got that, you're actually going to add on some more bands. So you're going to take your next two colors. So first, I'm going to be using blue. So I'm going from pink, yellow, blue, purple. I'm going to put my blues over here on the right, the same way that we just did. And then I'll do the same thing with my purple on the left. So stretch them across those same two pegs that you stretched the yellow across previously. And then if you remember, we put on some white bands last time, so we're going to do that again. Take your white, stretch it between the same two pegs. You're always going to be putting your white on the same two pegs that they're always, or that they've always been on. So that will never change. And then guess what? You're going to do the exact same thing with the blue and the purple. You're going to lift these bands that are on the peg with the white bands up and over. Do the same thing with the purple. So again, I find my fingers are a little easier to do this with. So I'm just going to drop those off like that. Do the same thing with the purple. Just lift them up and over. All right, so now that you've got that, now you're gonna finally start fishtailing. So you will need your hook for this. So you can see you should have just 3 white bands on this peg here. There should be no other bands. And once you have that, you're just gonna take the bottom band and lift it up and over. Do the same thing over here with these bands. Just lift the bottom one up and over. And then flip your monster tail around and do the exact same thing. Up and over, bottom band over those top 2 white bands, and then flip it back. So now that you got that, you can just push everything down. And now we're going to get into the really funky part. So this is going to be kind of weird, going to be kind of a lot, but it's basically what's weaving together those bands in the middle. So first, you're going to take the bands on your bottom center peg. So start with bottom center. You're going to move these bands up here to the top right. When I say bottom center, top right, I'm not talking about these 2 pegs out here. I'm talking about just these 6 pegs right in the middle there. So bottom center goes to top right. So I like to use my hook for this. And then just scoot them over there. And when you do this, make sure that your bands aren't like twisting, obviously. So make sure they stay straight. And you are going to push these like up onto another white band, kind of like what you did with the blue and the purple earlier. And just think ahead for that. Think like, okay, when I lift these yellow bands up and over onto that white band, they shouldn't twist. And as it's laid out currently, they're not going to twist. So we know we have it set up correctly. So that's the first thing you do. Next, you're going to take these blue bands on the far right peg, and we're going to move them to where the yellow bands used to be. So far right to center, bottom. And since these are pretty loose, I like to use my fingers yet again, but I'll try not to cover visibility so the camera can see what I'm doing. So lift those up, plop them over there. So from here to here, from far right to center, bottom. And you should see like the yellow bands and the blue bands are kind of like parallel to each other. They're not intersecting, they're both going in opposite directions. So now that we have that set up, we're going to take another white band and we're going to, as usual, put it on that same set of pegs that all of our white bands have been on so far. And just plop that on there. And then, like I said, you're going to pull those yellow bands up and onto that white band. So you're going to grab both yellow bands. So make sure you get both of them. And then just pull them up and over onto that white band. And of course, try to keep them straight and not twisted as much as possible. Now that you've finished that, there should be no more bands on these two pegs with white bands. So no more colored bands, excuse me. There should be white bands there. There should be 3 on each peg. And so since there's 3 on each peg, that means we can take the bottom band and lift it over. And then of course do the same thing over here. So you just lifted white bands up and over on these 2 right white pegs. And you can push that down now that you're done with it. Alright, so now that we've done that side, we've done the right side here, we're going to do something very similar on the left side. And so we're going to take these top center pink bands and move them down to the bottom left. So top center to bottom left. And as usual, while doing this, make sure your bands don't twist. So I'm just going to pick mine up, pull them over here and plop them down. So as you can see, not twisting. They should be good once we lift those up and over. And then we're going to take these far left purple bands and move them to the top middle. Far left to top middle. And again, since they're kind of loose, I'm going to use my fingers for that. Far left to top middle. And we get this same sort of parallel action going on here. The purple and the pink, they're parallel to each other. They're not intersecting, not doing anything weird. Now that we got that all laid out the way that we want, we can take a white band, put it on these left 2 pegs that have been holding all of our white bands so far. And then a lot like what we did on the right side, we're going to lift these pink bands up and over onto that white band. So make sure you grab both bands and just lift them up and over. And try not to make them twist. Now that we've done that, we're going to fishtail our white bands. So there's nothing left on these pegs except for the white bands. That means I can fishtail them. And then push everything down. Alright, and then the last little finishing touch that you have to do to this repeat is you gotta flip-flop the blue and the purple bands. And so basically we're just going to make them trade places. So first I'm going to move my blue bands up to, so center bottom peg to top right peg. That's just, it's not their final spot, I'm just putting it there for now while we move the purple bands. And then, like I said, we want them to switch places with where the blue used to be. So that means I can move the purple down to the bottom middle. So I'm going to do that. Just move those over to the bottom middle. And then, like I said, we want the blue in the center middle. So we're just going to put those there. So don't forget this step at the end of everything else that you just did. Alright, so that is a full repeat of the pattern. So I'll show you another one just so you can see what it looks like and just so you can get an idea for how the color pattern goes. And I'm going to go through it a little bit faster, so if you need more of an in-depth explanation, you can rewind the video and go back to that previous segment. So we got pink, yellow, blue, purple, got one repeat of the colors out of the way. So that means I'm going to start again with pink and yellow. So if you guys remember, we put pink on the right and then yellow on the left. We're going to do the same thing again. So pink on the right. Put it on those 2 pegs as usual. Yellow on the left. And I really recommend, if you're going to do 4 colors like I am, like sketch out a little like color chart before you get started. Like sketch out your little monster tail and then put like pink, like P, Y, and then B, and then P, or something to help you remember what order you're putting the colors in, because I even got confused about this earlier. Like I accidentally switched some colors around in this and then had to redo it. So make sure you keep good track of your colors so you don't get them all mixed up. So just put those on the pegs as usual. Next, I'm going to put down my fishtail bands. So 1 on the right, 1 on the left in the usual fishtail spot. And then of course lift the yellows and the pinks over onto those fishtail bands. And as usual, now that we have just 3 white bands on each fishtail peg, we're going to fishtail them. Now you can push everything down. Alright, so now we're going to do our weird crisscrossing. So I like to start on the right. So first, you got to get your bands onto your white band pegs. So for this one, you're going to move these purple bands bottom middle to top right. And while you do that, make sure you don't get the band twisted. So bottom middle to top right. And then far right to bottom middle. Far right to bottom middle. I'm trying to do this with my hook so I don't cover the camera with my hand, but it's not going super great. There we go. And again, they should be parallel. There are actually a couple different ways you can make this bracelet, but I like this method because the parallel helps me remember that I'm doing it correctly. So now that we got that parallel action going on, we can take our fishtail white band, put it in its usual spot, and then you can lift the purple bands up and over. And again, double check. It's kind of hard to get a good angle at it, but you can see the purple is not like twisted in the middle. If it is, put it back on the peg, untwist it, and then try again. So we can fishtail our white bands now, so that's what I'm going to do. So just those pegs with 3 white bands on them. And then push them down. Alright, so next we're moving top middle to bottom left. So move those blues from the top middle to the bottom left. And then yellows from far left to top middle. Far left to top middle. And again, we got the yellow bands parallel with the blue bands, so we know we did it right. And then you're going to take a fishtail band, plop it on there, and lift your blues up and over. So just looking in there, it's kind of hard to see, but my blues aren't twisting, so I know I did that right. And then fishtail the whites. Alright, and now that we're done, working those bands, the final step, can't forget this step. I feel like this is probably the most likely step you'll forget. You can't forget to flip-flop these colored bands that you have left. So to do that, take your bottom middle bands to the top right, top middle to bottom middle, top right to top middle. Alright, so that is a repeat of everything, yet again. So you should start to see just a little bit of it peeking out at the bottom. And I'll let you guess which colors come next. I'll give you a second to think about it. Alright, if you said blue on the right and purple on the left, you're right. So congrats. You did your homework, you marked it down, or you just remembered it in your noggin well enough. But those would be your next colors. So place those down. And I'm not going to do another repeat because, again, it's the exact same as the last two repeats that I did for you guys. So if you need to rewind to look at those repeats, I should have one pink and yellow repeat, one blue and purple repeat, so you can go back to those. And yeah, you basically just repeat that same step over and over and over again until you get close to finishing your bracelet. And so I'm going to do that off camera. Again, exact same steps. I will mark those repeats in the description with some timestamps so you can see exactly when I made one repeat and the other repeat. So if you need to rewind, rewatch those, you can. But I'm going to finish this off camera and come back to show you what to do to finish off your bracelet completely. Alright, I am back. I have gotten my bracelet the length that I want it to be. And it probably doesn't look super hot currently because you'll have to like stretch it, mess around with it a bit to get it to lay flat the way that you like. So you just kind of want to go through and kind of massage the bracelet. Really try to get rid of like any crisscrossing bands, so just kind of make them lay as flat as possible. So you'll want to do that probably after you finish is easiest. And I have just ended with the last step of my of my, whatever we just did, of my repeat, I guess is the best way to put it. And I remembered to switch my two bands, or two sets of bands here. So don't forget that last little step of swapping these two bands as places. So I finished that up. And then the next step to finish it off to get rid of these two pairs of bands is we're basically going to do our usual step without adding on new bands. So usually you put two bands here, put two bands there. We're going to skip that. So we're just putting down our fishtail bands and fishtailing them. And that's it for this step. So just put down your two white bands in their usual places and fishtail them. And that's all you're doing. You can push it down. And then we're basically going to do our next usual step, except without having these bands that we gotta worry about. So usually you gotta move them around, put them in different spots, but we don't have to do that. We're gonna do the same stuff that we usually do with these center bands though. So usually I move this one, do some stuff with it, and then after that, I move the center bottom peg bands to the top right peg. And so we're still going to do that because we still have those bands there. And then we put on another white band, push those purple bands up and over onto the white band, and then fishtail. Fishtail on both pegs. And then usually we have some bands over here that we move, do whatever with, yada yada. And then in addition to that, we take the top middle bands and move them to the bottom left. So we're still going to do that. Then put down our fishtail band. Pull the blue bands onto that fishtail band. And then fishtail. So at this point, you shouldn't have any more colored bands left on your monster tail. You should just have your side fishtail bands. And so from here on out, pretty easy. You see that there should be two bands on each peg, and you're just going to lift the bottom one over as well. So now there should only be one band on each peg. And then last step before you add your C-clips, I think I forgot to add those to the materials, but pretty obvious you're going to need 2 C-clips. You're going to take your top bands and just pull them down to meet their other end on our front pegs. So then do the same thing over here. Take this band off, put it with its other half on the front peg like that. And then of course you take your C-clips and you just clip those 2 bands. Now that they're all clipped, you can just pop them off your loom. And then of course, like I said, you'll want to mess around with your bracelet to get it looking just a little bit nicer in the middle. And then of course, you can clip your cap bands at the ends. So make sure you get both halves of your cap bands. Same thing with your other clip. And there you go. There's your bracelet. So I did this one obviously in 4 different colors, but I'll just briefly explain how to do other colors. So on your loom, you know, first step we did pink, then yellow, and then after that we did blue and purple. If you wanted to do 2 colors, like I did with this pink bordered Chinese finger trap, then you'd just do all white first, or all black first. So all white or all black, and then the other color. So all white first, then all black. And that would be that variation. If you wanted to do one like this, then you do 1 step of all white, followed by a step of pink and blue. And so that's what you do for the different variations going on there. And then another way I just remembered how I'd check to make sure I was on the correct color is that, let me flip this around the right way, is that I'd look at the side of my bracelet while I was on the loom. And you can kind of see some colors poking out here. So you can see on the right side I go from, if it'll focus, pink to yellow, blue to purple. And then on the left I go the opposite direction, purple to blue, yellow to pink. And so if I'm confused, if I'm working on my loom and I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot what row I was on, then I could look at the side and I could see, okay, well, for example, say I just finished a blue. Oh, I just finished a blue. Then that means I'm going to put on a purple on that side. So that's how you'd look back there. Or I think, no, you'd finish on a purple and then you'd be like, okay, well, finished on a purple, that means I'm putting a pink over there. So yeah, just look back on the side of your bracelet. That'll tell you what colors that you put on next. Just some other tips I thought of while I was gone. But yeah, that is the Fishtailed Chinese finger trap bracelet. I had a lot of fun figuring out how to make this on the monster tail in a way that made sense. But yeah, there's that bracelet. I'm hoping to come out with some more tutorials at some point, although I will be very busy soon, so, you know, I'll do my best. But yeah, I don't want to go away entirely or anything. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you soon.